So one of the things, especially with the mural, one of the aesthetic choices that I really liked a lot with the movie is that every so often the mural of Candyman with his mouth wide open, which is like something you'd see on a carnival ride.
Yeah,
Sure. That you would like ride into. It'll flash and then disappear again in these kind of key moments, and it's disorienting, but it's really this, I think it's a cool visualization of like how much a legend can start to ingratiate itself into different parts of your life, because she sees it in different places. Like it flashes in like totally disparate moments and in different locations. It's kind of taking over her life basically. And I kind of like that as like a style choice, I think.
As like an Exorcist the version you've never seen type thing.
Yeah. And then another thing I really liked in terms of the aesthetics, or maybe even the sets maybe, a review I saw on Letterboxd from Willow McClay kind of noted how in the movie there's this like, especially like in the condo that Helen and boyfriend have, there's like this decaying architecture within this like finer architecture basically, and I like the note of that, and I like that as a visual metaphor, the like idea that there are so many cases in this country of just building atop these very ugly things and just pushing them down as far as you can rather than like actually reckoning with them.
Mm-hmm.
And in this movie, you know, that's obviously speaking to...
I mean, you say that's a thing in this country. I would like to point out the historical Troy. Dig deep enough, there's like 3 different versions of that city or something like that. Maybe it's been going on for thousands of years.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the case of Candyman, you know, what's being pushed down and buried is obviously, you know, racial violence being, you know, meted out on black bodies. Yeah, but you know, there's like a version of the architecture metaphor thing too in other horror movies like The Shining, where this like seemingly really nice hotel is built upon this indigenous, you know, burial ground, and that's not really reckoned with, and you know, maybe that's not the reason everything.
Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Poltergeist is the classic example, the film that truly draws attention to that.
And so, yeah, I really liked that kind of choice too of using these locations to sort of, you know, kind of speak to some of what the movie is trying to get at with its storytelling and its plot.
Well, yeah, and as for the location itself, the Cabrini Green projects, which is like both building complex and neighborhood because it's like that big. When I first saw this movie, I wasn't familiar with Cabrini Green. I live in Milwaukee. I've close to Chicago. My mom grew up in Chicago. She was very familiar with Cabrini Green and its reputation, and its reputation is very much how it's presented in the movie. But the one I was familiar with, which is perhaps a more interesting historical document because of the many reasons for its failure, and I might not be pronouncing it right, but the Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis. That was like a very similar thing to Cabrini Green, I guess, where there were like issues of the actual design and the whole collapse of that. And I say collapse, like not like a literal collapse, but they tore it down after like 15 years because it was like such a failure. But it was like designed to be this building that would like defeat poverty. And it made things so much worse. And then there's just this like idea of being isolated in a community like that's, whether it's designed to or not, just kind of keeps you within it and keeps you from the outside of the world. Like Helen as this character is someone who has access to the entire city, and then she keeps going there and she is an outsider until Candyman basically makes her, for lack of a better term, like an eternal resident of it. Like, yes. I think that stuff's really interesting. As for I read something about why they chose Cabrini Green. So this is a story by Clive Barker. Do you remember the name of the story? It's not Candyman. It's
No, it's like
the Forbidden. I was going to say I was going to say the Unforgiven. It was the Forbidden. It's a short story by Clive Barker. Clive Barker's British. I don't know how much of the racial tension, the racial aspect of it was in his original story. I haven't read it. I would guess there's at least some kind of thing about class, but I understand the story takes place in Liverpool. They decided to set it in the U.S. Bernard Rose said, like, in particular, Cabrini Green was, like, perfect because, A, it has a reputation in Chicago, but also, B, visually, it is smack dab in the middle of things, and if it is like, so self-contained, you leave it, and you're in a completely different world, like, in any direction. the fact that it's, I guess, so different from everything around it is kind of interesting. I mean, I can't speak too much to that being true. I'll just take Bernard Rose's word on it, but I think that's interesting. And I do think, again, what I was saying about Helen, you see her in other parts of Chicago. It's just like such a visual difference when she's in Cabrini Green.
You know you're in completely different places just immediately by the look of them. You would think they were in completely different cities even.
Yeah.
With the difference in look.
Absolutely. It's like Bridesmaids comparing Chicago to Milwaukee. But no, I think Candyman is a really good movie. It's very close to being a great movie. It's not quite there for me, and I think it comes down to the storytelling isn't quite as good as I think it could have been. I think you brought up the gothic romance aspect, and I compared that to some of the Universal monsters, and I think that's perfectly fair. But it's the communication about that is like kind of weird. Like when he first shows up to kind of terrorize / seduce her, because it really is both, he just kind of shows up. That felt weird. As great as that scene is in the parking garage, like he does just kind of like appear.
In a parking lot, no less, which is kind of a weird, like, first encounter of such an iconic character.
Yeah, and then like the romance part, like I again, as good as I think Virginia Madsen is in playing this part, I think she's really good in the scenes where she's grappling with the idea that she's possibly insane. Like when they're showing her the video of her when she's saying Candyman is under the bed and there's like nothing there. Like her reaction to that is great. But I never truly believe that she is being seduced by Candyman. And I guess the story could function without her truly. Like, she could just be victim all the way. But I don't think that's what they're trying to do. I know he says not. Be my victim, but they're trying to do something a little bit more for that doesn't quite work for me.
Another reason, like, it's definitely what they're trying to get across is because that's not even the only Clive Barker story where you have this push and pull between this, like, very kind of, like, you know, messed up, like, romantic element of some kind. And
Midnight Meat Train, horror. That's right.
Yeah.
No, Hellraiser, obviously. No, I know what you mean. The Hellbound Heart, of course.
Yeah, I think she sells it pretty well, but, like, they maybe could have used another scene or two to really develop a fuller, like, romantic feel to it, maybe, than just, like, the kiss with, like, the bees and everything like that.
I think so, for sure. And I think that there could have been, like, I don't know, maybe, you know, I don't want, I always hesitate to try and, like, rewrite these movies because, you know, I'm trying to solve problems that might only be problems for me. But I'm thinking of, like, when she's got her, again, I didn't think it was husband, I thought it was just boyfriend, but serious boyfriend. And then, like, obviously when her best friend dies and all that, like, everyone's, like, abandoning her. And I thought, like, he could have played into that, like, I will not leave you. And again, I don't really feel like he does do that. I don't know. Someone else could watch this and completely disagree with me, but that's my truth, damn it.
Yes.
So any other thoughts on Candyman, or do we want to go into which movie do we prefer?
No, I love that. I had not actually, as big as a horror fan as I am, this was one of my blind spots of, like...
Yeah, these were both first watches for you, I believe, right?
Yep, and, like, I mean, you know, Candyman in particular is, like, a touchstone of, you know, 90s horror. It's something like that, you know, and Silence of the Lambs immediately come to mind for the 90s Scream, obviously.
Blair Witch, Sixth Sense,
yeah. And it was the only one of those I had not seen, and I really, really loved it. I appreciated how ambitious it was, and, you know, maybe it didn't land everything in terms of the ambition of what it was trying to communicate, but I appreciate when any horror movie is being that ambitious in the first place.
Well, and also, like, you consider this, we consider this a slasher movie, which is how most people would categorize it anyways, like, the slasher is one of the least creative genres to ever exist. It's basically rinse and repeat. For any significant shakeup, I respect it. Like, A Nightmare on Elm Street obviously shook it up, did something different with it, and that's awesome. It has its own imitators. Candyman taking that kind of slasher premise, creating a truly unique character, a character that, like you said, as sympathetic a background for any horror antagonist as we've ever seen, basically, and telling the story in a way that where there is violence, there is disturbing stuff, disturbing imagery. There's more blood in this movie than you might expect for being, for the most part, a classy movie as far as horror movies go. Mm-hmm. For going that different route when they could have just gone Halloween, Friday the 13th, you know, I'm not saying they would have gone as stupid as Leprechaun, but like those kinds of movies.
Yeah. And they,
you know,
they
have their place, but like this, I will always respect something that does something different.